feel that Kamala Harris is probably the front runner?
I'm really interested in hearing what Kamala has to say.
I think Kamala has the name recognition right now.
Tonight, we are getting the pulse of voters as Democrats across the country are throwing their support behind Vice President Kamala Harris, who now appears to be the front runner to take over as the Democratic candidate for president. We continue to follow breaking news, historic news that is, in the 2024 election. After weeks of speculation, President Joe Biden has dropped out of the race and endorsed Vice President Harris. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Esteban. It is the first time in over 50 years that the incumbent president has dropped out mid-election. That was President Lyndon B Johnson in March of 1968, and it is the first time to ever come this late in the race, after 14 million votes cast for Biden in the primary. But the news came in a very modern way, with the president making the announcement on his X account. That, of course, led to an outpouring of reaction from voters, our local lawmakers, and legislators on Capitol Hill, as we all wonder what will come next. We'll get to all that, but first we want to begin our team coverage for you tonight with national correspondent Kayla Gaskins, who has a look at the initial reaction from Capitol Hill.
After weeks of mounting pressure from his own party, following the poor debate performance, Joe Biden stepping down from the top of the ticket.
It is time to pass the torch so that we can have our best chance of winning in November.
The announcement made Sunday afternoon on social media. Joe Biden posting a letter to his personal accounts that reads in part, "While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the interest of my party and the country for me to stand down."
I'm emotional because I am still riding with Biden. I still support my president.
In a follow-up post, he gave Vice President Kamala Harris his full endorsement as heir apparent to the nomination. The president making it clear he plans to serve the rest of his term. Donald Trump responding to the news on Truth Social, writing, "Crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve." CNN reporting Trump thinks Kamala Harris will be easier to beat. House Speaker Mike Johnson demanding Joe Biden resign immediately. Earlier in the day, Johnson saying this to CNN.
It's an interesting question, Jake. If he's incapable of running for president, how is he capable of governing right now? I mean, there is 5 months left in this administration. It's a real concern, and it's a danger to the country.
President Biden spent the past week secluded in Delaware recovering from COVID-19, reportedly growing increasingly furious as top Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama flaked on their support. For weeks, Democrat megadonors expressed concerns over Biden's ability to do the job, some withholding donations, fueling alarm among party leaders. As the pressure increased, Democrats began preparing for a potential Kamala Harris run should she end up as the nominee. An effort reportedly underway to vet who could run as her vice president. Kamala Harris releasing a statement saying, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination." Even with Biden's endorsement, Kamala Harris faces an uncertain path. The Democratic convention in Chicago, which starts August 19th, could be an open contest rather than a coronation. The nearly 4,700 delegates picking who they want to put up against Donald Trump this November. In Washington, Kayla Gaskins, KOMO News.
Kayla, thanks very much. People are already out celebrating the possibilities of a Harris presidential ticket. They made signs and they started chanting near the vice president's residence today in Washington, D.C., putting them up near the gate. A Harris presidency would be historic. She'd be the first woman and first person of South Asian descent to serve as president of the United States. All day, we've been monitoring social media as reaction comes in on President Biden's announcement. Several of our local and state leaders have posted their responses on X. Mayor Bruce Harrell posted, quote, "Thank you, President Biden, for always putting the American people first. From leading our nation out of the pandemic to making us stronger with job growth, climate action, and a once-in-a-generation investment in infrastructure." Washington Congressman Adam Smith supported the president's decision. He posted, "I applaud President Joe Biden for making this difficult choice. I think it is the best path forward for our country." And Washington Senator Patty Murray posted this statement on X. She thanked President Biden and endorsed Kamala Harris, saying, quote, "We must beat Donald Trump, and I know Kamala Harris can win." Local candidates are questioning how President Biden's decision will impact down-ballot races in the House as well as the Senate. KOMO's Jeremy Harris spent the day talking to Republican and Democratic leaders about today's dramatic developments.
With just under a month until the Democratic National Convention, the big question is going to be whether the party will unite behind Kamala Harris as their nominee. What is clear is that President Biden's announcement that he's stepping away from the race is going to have major impacts on elections nationwide. President Biden's announcement he's stepping aside as the Democratic candidate for president prompted immediate reaction from Washington leaders. Governor Inslee thanking the president for what he called a long record of accomplishments, and Democrat candidate for governor Bob Ferguson saying Biden preserved and protected democracy. Ferguson also posting this photo of him with Kamala Harris, who may now take the top of the Democrat ticket. What are you hearing from candidates in the last few hours now that this decision's been made?
You know, overall, I'm seeing strong support for Vice President Harris to move into this role.
Shasti Conrad is the chair of Washington State Democrats.
I was overwhelmed with gratitude for President Biden, both for his leadership, his career in public service, but also for making what I know was a very hard decision.
Biden quitting this race at this point is destabilizing to his party. And they can try to put a pretty face on it, but the fact is, if this was going to happen, it probably should have happened 6 months ago.
Jim Walsh, who leads Washington Republicans, criticized Biden's decision and Democrat leaders.
Knowing everything that everybody knows about Joe Biden, they selected him to be the candidate. And to sort of change horses at this late point crossing the stream is not good for any cowboy.
With the Democratic convention now weeks away, Biden's announcement is likely to have a major impact on races nationwide and here in Washington.
And really, it's about making sure that we are all coalescing around our strongest nominee, and I believe that to be Vice President Kamala Harris.
Luckily, on our side, love him or hate him, we're pretty unified behind Donald Trump.
Federal election filings show the Biden-Harris campaign has about $100 million in cash on hand. She will now have access to that money to help her with her campaign moving forward. President Biden's endorsement of Kamala Harris as candidate will certainly help her, but doesn't necessarily guarantee her the nearly 4,000 delegate votes at the convention. Reporting in Seattle, I'm Jeremy Harris, KOMO News.
Jeremy, we appreciate it. KOMO News political analyst Ron Dotzauer joined us in studio earlier tonight. He called it on Thursday, in fact, saying Biden would drop out of the race by the end of the weekend. Dotzauer said it really came down to timing.
And the timing for this to happen was now, about a month before the convention. But as a prelude to the convention, things were not going well. Obviously, there was the debate that was just a debacle. And then more recently, there was people sitting on their wallets, cutting off his money. There were polls in key states that said, you can't win. And there was colleagues and elected officials calling him to step down. So.
From the streets of Seattle to parks, coffee shops, social media sites, no shortage of opinions about Biden's decision and what it all means. KOMO's Karina Vargas talked to people around the city today, and as you might expect, voters are split.
Well, there is a lot of talk about his decision. Some tell me that this was the right call for President Biden to drop out of the race, while others say that this will only give former President Donald Trump the upper hand. Voters in downtown Seattle share their shock to President Biden dropping out of the race.
I was just expecting Biden's going to keep going, but I guess somebody finally got in his ear and changed his mind.
I'm kind of glad he has. You know, he's old, so he needs to move on.
Everybody has been so quick on the draw to say step down, but not adhering to his accomplishments, what he's done for the country.
Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic presidential nominee, with many people in Seattle sharing a mixed reaction. Hearing that Biden is endorsing Kamala Harris, what do you think about that?
No, I don't like that idea.
I believe Kamala would be phenomenal and deserving, but I don't know if America's ready for that.
Some tell me the election is getting closer and they worry if there will be enough time to make all the changes.
Sets the Democratic Party back a little bit and gives Trump a major opportunity to win, and we'll see. It's not a lot of time to recoup, to recover the ground they've lost. So It might be hard for them to do that, and you know, I think if the election were today, then Trump would win.
A lot of people share their uncertainty about what will happen next, but many say that they will be keeping an eye out on who will be the Democratic nominee. For now, reporting in Seattle, Karina Vargas, KOMO News.
We'll be watching and covering it, of course. Karina, thank you. President Biden's campaign took a tailspin in a matter of about just 3 weeks. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the timeline for you. It was June 27th when the candidates met on stage to debate. Biden was criticized for stumbling, having a raspy voice, and giving confusing answers. The president blamed the performance on a cold. Biden's performance led to the first Democratic lawmaker publicly calling on him to step down. That was on July 2nd. More lawmakers joined the chorus, and the president held his first solo press conference in months on July 11th. He vowed then he would stay in the race. Former President Donald Trump survived that assassination attempt that weekend at the rally in Pennsylvania. Biden condemned the violence and called for unity. Then on July 17th, President Biden tested positive for COVID-19, ratcheting up concerns about his age and health. He traveled to Delaware to self-isolate. That brings us to today, and President Biden issuing a statement bowing out of the race. We're continuing to follow the latest breaking developments in this election and its impacts across the country, including right here in Western Washington. We'll be sure to keep you up to date online at KOMOnews.com and tomorrow morning on KOMO Morning News starting at 4:30.